Fallout's most disturbing vaults ranked by cruelty. People often describe the vaults as humanity's last chance, but let's get something straight from the beginning. Every single vault in Fallout was built to make people suffer. Massive underground shelters built beneath American cities. Parents handed over their children believing concrete walls and steel doors would preserve the future. Families signed contracts believing these places would protect them. Sealed environments filled with food, medicine, power, and the promise that when the bombs finally came, civilization would survive. But for those chosen, surviving nuclear war turned out to be the least painful part. Because the greatest lie in Fallout is not that the world ended. It is that the vaults were never meant to save it. And perhaps the most disturbing part is that many experiments were not accidents. It was intentional. Today, we are ranking Fallout's most disturbing vaults by cruelty. Not by body count, not by how dangerous they became, not by which vault looked the scariest. We are ranking them by a simple question: how deliberately cruel was Vault-Tec willing to be? Vault 42. Compared to many vault experiments, Vault 42 sounds almost harmless. There were no human sacrifices, no secret drug experiments, and no social engineering designed to force residents into killing one another. Instead, Vault-Tec created a vault where no light bulb could exceed 40 watts. Vault 42 itself remains one of the more mysterious vaults in Fallout lore because very little is actually known about its inhabitants. There are no surviving populations to study, no famous overseers, and no detailed terminal entries describing daily life inside. What we do know is disturbing enough. The entire vault was intentionally designed to operate with extremely poor lighting conditions. This may initially sound insignificant compared to many other experiments, but as far as we know, vault residents were expected to spend their entire lives underground. No sunlight, open skies, and natural day and night cycles, only artificial lighting. And Vault-Tec deliberately made that environment worse. When people imagine underground living, lighting is very important. Human beings rely heavily on proper light exposure. Sleep cycles, hormone production, mood regulation, concentration, productivity, and mental health are all affected by it. Vault-Tec almost certainly knew this, which creates the obvious question: why intentionally reduce lighting? The likely explanation is that Vault-Tec wanted data regarding long-term efficiency. They wanted to determine the following: how much comfort can be removed before people stop functioning? Can populations remain productive with fewer resources? Can energy consumption be reduced without reducing performance? And can humans adapt to conditions that are objectively worse? And Vault 42 may have existed to answer those questions. This experiment becomes even more disturbing because there's no obvious signal when things go wrong. Compared to other vaults, there's no reactor explosion, massacre, and violent collapse. Instead, the suffering would likely happen slowly. Residents would wake up getting tired, workers becoming less productive, people becoming increasingly stressed, and children growing up never understanding what proper daylight even looks like. Because of the experiment's simplicity, many residents may never have even realized they were part of one. And that is what makes Vault 42 cruel. Not because it produced the most suffering, but because suffering itself was built directly into the environment. Vault-Tec did not create a dangerous vault, but a worse version of everyday life. Vault 95. Few vault experiments demonstrate cruelty more clearly than taking people who successfully rebuilt their lives, then deliberately destroying them again. Vault 95 was all about that. This vault was designed around a population of chem addicts. Before entering the vault, its residents were selected specifically because of severe substance abuse problems. Some were addicted to jet, while others relied on Psycho, Med-X, alcohol, and various chems common throughout the Fallout universe. Vault-Tec promised something different. They promised rehabilitation. Residents entering Vault 95 believed they were joining a recovery program. They were told they would receive treatment, structure, support, and the opportunity to rebuild themselves underground after nuclear war. And initially, that is exactly what happened. The Vault's systems focused heavily on rehabilitation. Residents received counseling, addiction treatment, structured schedules, and communal support systems designed to encourage sobriety. For years, the experiment appeared successful. According to terminal entries found inside the vault during the events of Fallout 4, the residents remained sober for roughly 5 years. Long enough for relationships to form, families to develop, former addicts to begin trusting one another, and for the residents to create communities, friendships, and support groups. For the first time in many of their lives, they may feel like things were actually improving. And then Vault-Tec activated the second phase. Hidden inside Vault 95 was a secret cache containing enormous quantities of chems and addictive substances, and the residents were intentionally informed about it. This was the real experiment. Vault-Tec never wanted to know whether rehabilitation worked. They wanted to know what happened when temptation returned. And the results were catastrophic. Terminal entries describe rapid social collapse, fights broke out, trust disappeared, and relapses spread throughout the population. The community that spent years rebuilding itself began tearing itself apart almost immediately. By the time players discover Vault 95 in Fallout 4, the original residents are gone. Instead, the vault has become occupied by Gunners, one of the Commonwealth's major mercenary factions. Scattered throughout the facility are remains of the failed experiment, destroyed living quarters, abandoned rehabilitation areas, and terminals documenting the collapse. Vault 95 is particularly disturbing because, unlike many experiments, the residents actually succeeded. This was not a failed rehabilitation program, but a successful one. The residents proved recovery was possible, but Vault-Tec simply chose not to allow it. And this is what pushes Vault 95 higher on the cruelty ranking. The company did not simply study addiction, they weaponized hope itself. The residents were given exactly what they wanted. They were given sobriety, community, and stability. Then, those achievements were intentionally placed in front of a firing squad. It demonstrates a different kind of cruelty. Vault-Tec looked at people improving themselves and decided that ruining them again would produce better data. But compared to what comes next, this experiment almost feels personal. Vault 106. Some Vault experiments were designed to study addiction, others studied obedience. But Vault 106 studied something much simpler. What happens when you destroy the human mind itself? Located deep within the Capital Wasteland, Vault 106 is one of the more infamous locations players can discover during Fallout 3. Unlike some vaults whose experiments slowly unfolded over generations, Vault 106 collapsed relatively quickly. The experiment began only 10 days after the vault was sealed. That detail alone tells you almost everything. Vault-Tec was not interested in long-term adaptation. They wanted immediate results. The vault's true purpose involved psychoactive chemicals. Hidden within its air filtration systems was a system designed to release hallucinogenic compounds directly into the vault atmosphere. Shortly after sealing, these chemicals were dispersed throughout the entire population. Residents received no warning, no consent, and no preparation. One day, they entered believing they had escaped nuclear war, and 10 days later, their own vault began poisoning them. The effects were catastrophic. Terminal entries throughout the vault reveal widespread psychological deterioration. Residents began suffering hallucinations, paranoia, confusion, aggression, and severe mental instability. Security personnel attempted to maintain order, but eventually they became affected as well. Over time, organized society inside Vault 106 completely collapsed. When players finally enter during Fallout 3, they discover something unusual, even compared to other vaults. the experiment never truly ended. Vault 106 actively attacks the player psychologically. Throughout exploration, players experience strange visual hallucinations like ghostly figures suddenly appearing, people vanishing, corridors distorting, and objects moving. At multiple points, players briefly lose control while hallucination sequences play out. Even centuries later, the vault still feels wrong. Its residents remain inside as crazed survivors who attack intruders on sight. This is what makes Vault 106 particularly disturbing compared to many experiments. Vault tech successfully proved that controlled psychological collapse could be induced through environmental manipulation, which raises the obvious question, why perform this experiment? One possible explanation is crowd control. Throughout Fallout, Vault tech repeatedly demonstrates interest in controlling populations rather than simply preserving them. A chemical capable of altering behavior, suppressing resistance, or destabilizing problematic populations would be extremely valuable. Another possibility is more practical. Vault tech may have wanted to understand how enclosed populations react when mental health deteriorates rapidly. After all, many Vault experiments revolve around isolation, stress, overcrowding, or confinement. Vault 106 simply accelerated the process. But what pushes this Vault higher on the cruelty ranking is intentionality. Vault tech did not accidentally expose residents. They designed the filtration system specifically for this purpose. And the sad part is that the residents never had a chance. There was no period of normal life, no opportunity to build stable communities, and no adjustment period. Their reward for surviving nuclear war was becoming laboratory subjects within days. Vault 106 reveals something important about Vault tech. Many experiments attempted to measure human behavior, yet Vault 106 skipped that step entirely. Instead of observing the human mind, they chose to break it first. And unfortunately for its residents, the results were exactly what Vault tech wanted. Vault 34. Many Vault experiments relied on manipulation, some relied on chemicals, others on psychological pressure. But Vault 34 took a different approach. It simply gave people exactly what they wanted, then waited. Located beneath the Mojave Wasteland, Vault 34 was originally designed around one specific idea: weapons. A lot of them. The residents of Vault 34 strongly supported gun ownership and personal freedoms. Vault tech intentionally selected inhabitants who believed heavily in the right to bear arms and provided them with one of the largest armories ever placed inside a vault. On paper, this sounds less like an experiment and more like paradise. The vault had large residential sectors, extensive facilities, recreational areas, massive stockpiles of weapons, and thousands of firearms and ammunition. Compared to many vaults, residents initially had relatively comfortable lives. But this was never the real experiment. The armory itself was. Vault tech designed Vault 34 so that access to its enormous weapons stockpile could be restricted by the Overseer. Whenever problems emerged, the Overseer could simply lock down the armory. Predictably, this created problems almost immediately. Terminal entries and environmental storytelling throughout Fallout, New Vegas, show increasing tension between residents and Vault leadership. As generations passed, disagreements emerged regarding overcrowding, resource management, and access to weapons. The population itself became another problem. Vault 34 eventually suffered from overcrowding as new generations continued being born inside confined spaces. With limited resources and increasing population pressure, leadership proposed stronger control measures. But many residents were not happy about this. Eventually, the situation exploded. Riots broke out, and residents attempted to seize control of the armory. Armed conflicts occurred inside the vault itself. And then, the worst possible thing happened. Critical infrastructure was damaged, specifically the reactor. By the time players enter Vault 34 during Fallout, New Vegas, the consequences are obvious. Large portions of the vault are heavily irradiated, water fills multiple sections, and corpses remain scattered throughout the facility. Many former residents became feral ghouls, while others died trapped inside. And perhaps most disturbing of all, many people survived long enough to understand exactly what was happening. Vault 34 also directly shaped the Mojave itself. A large group of survivors escaped before total collapse, and these refugees eventually became the Boomers. Players encounter them later at Nellis Air Force Base, where their obsession with weapons, artillery, explosives, and isolationism still reflects the culture that developed inside the vault. This is what makes Vault 34 more cruel than it initially appears. Vault-Tec did not simply place weapons inside a vault. They deliberately created a system where conflict and weapon access became intertwined. They selected residents with strong beliefs regarding firearms, creating artificial scarcity around the weapons, then placed thousands of heavily armed people inside confined spaces for generations. The experiment almost feels like Vault-Tec asking a question: if enough pressure is applied, will armed societies eventually destroy themselves? And unfortunately, the answer appears to have been yes. Vault 34 demonstrates a recurring pattern throughout Fallout. Vault 92. Officially, this vault existed to preserve some of America's greatest musicians after the nuclear war. Unofficially, it became one of Vault-Tec's most disturbing experiments. Located beneath the Capitol wasteland and explored during Fallout 3, Vault 92 initially looked far more civilized than many other experiments. Its residents were not selected because of addiction, aggression, or political beliefs. Instead, Vault-Tec filled the vault with some of the world's most talented musicians. The explanation they released was simple: preserve musical talent after nuclear war. And the idea sounded reasonable. If artists survived, culture would also survive. But as usual, that was not the real experiment. Hidden throughout Vault 92 was a system called white noise mind suggestion. Behind walls, ventilation systems, and audio equipment, the vault contained devices capable of broadcasting ultra-low frequency white noise mixed with subliminal messaging. The purpose was not entertainment, it was conditioning. Shortly after sealing, residents began hearing strange sounds throughout the vault. At first, the effects residents experienced seemed minor: headaches, difficulty concentrating, and sleep problems. But eventually, things became much worse. Terminal entries reveal increasing paranoia among residents. Some reported hearing voices, became aggressive, suffered memory problems, and psychological deterioration. Vault staff initially attempted to hide what was happening, but they failed. Over time, the population completely collapsed. When players finally enter Vault 92 during Fallout 3, the experiment's aftermath is everywhere. The vault is filled with hostile residents driven insane by prolonged exposure. Many sections remain strangely intact, which makes exploration even more uncomfortable. Unlike vaults destroyed by explosions or war, Vault 92 feels abandoned while simultaneously feeling occupied. Broken instruments remain scattered throughout living quarters, practice rooms still exist, and music halls remain standing. But the people inside have long since lost themselves. Several terminals throughout the vault help explain what happened. One particularly disturbing detail is that residents continued being exposed during sleep. This means many inhabitants may not have even understood what was happening to them. Imagine waking every day feeling slightly worse, sleeping becoming difficult, thoughts becoming harder to organize, friends slowly changing, and eventually realizing the environment itself is attacking your mind. So why musicians? This is where the experiment becomes more interesting. One theory is that musicians were selected because of their heightened exposure to sound frequencies. If people who constantly worked with sound could resist conditioning better than average populations, that would be valuable data. Another possibility is much darker. Vault-Tec wanted populations that relied heavily on concentration, memory, precision, and creativity. If mind manipulation could break highly functional individuals, it could probably break anyone. What makes Vault 92 rank this high is not simply that residents went insane, it is its cruel intention. Vault-Tec built systems specifically designed to bypass conscious thought. A direct psychological interference. The residents could not avoid it nor escape it. Vault 92 reveals one of the more terrifying ideas behind Vault-Tec. They wanted to rewrite the people themselves. Vault 112. For most people entering a vault, survival meant spending the rest of their lives underground. The residents of Vault 112 never even got that much. Instead, they spent centuries trapped inside somebody else's world. Located beneath the ruins of the capital wasteland, Vault 112 initially appears different from many other experiments. Unlike overcrowded vaults or failed social experiments, this facility remained operational for centuries after the Great War. The reason was simple: almost nobody inside was actually living there. Instead of traditional living quarters, Vault 112 relied on suspended animation pods connected to a virtual reality system known as the Tranquility Lounger. Officially, the technology was presented as a revolutionary solution for long-term survival. Residents could remain safely preserved while experiencing comfortable virtual environments. But in reality, Vault-Tec had created something much darker. The residents of Vault 112 spent nearly their entire existence trapped inside a simulation called Tranquility Lane. Players encounter this directly during Fallout 3. Unlike the ruined cities and radioactive wastelands surrounding the vault, Tranquility Lane appears as a peaceful suburban neighborhood inspired by mid-century America, with white fences, clean houses, children playing outside, and perfect weather. Everything looks normal until you realize nobody can leave. The simulation itself was controlled by the Vault Overseer, Dr. Stanislaus Braun. Braun is one of the more important figures connected to pre-war Vault-Tec experiments. A former scientist involved heavily with Vault development, Braun gained near total control over the simulation environment. And eventually, he became bored. Terminal entries and dialogue reveal the horrifying reality of Vault 112. Braun repeatedly tortured residents for entertainment. He forced inhabitants to kill one another, reset memories, changed identities, and created psychological punishment scenarios. He even killed residents repeatedly, then revived them, again and again and again. This continued for centuries. One resident, Betty, is actually Braun himself, using an avatar to manipulate events inside the simulation. Players discover that the residents trapped within Tranquility Lane have effectively become prisoners kept alive purely for Braun's amusement. People like Mabel Henderson, George Nussbaum, Janet Rockwell, and others are not simply residents. They are captives. Some have spent generations trapped inside the same neighborhood. Some barely remember life outside, and others simply want death. What makes Vault 112 especially disturbing is how difficult escape actually is. Unlike other experiments, residents could not simply rebel. They could not physically leave and could not even properly die. Braun controlled the environment, the punishment, the memory, and the reality itself. And because the residents remained physically preserved inside their pods, they continued surviving while experiencing endless psychological abuse. Vault-Tec may have originally intended virtual reality as a survival tool. Perhaps it was meant for education, long-term habitation, or psychological preservation. But Vault 112 demonstrates the terrifying consequences of giving one person total control over an artificial world. Many Vault experiments destroyed bodies, but Vault 112 attacked something else. It attacked identity, freedom, and time itself. Surviving nuclear war only to spend centuries trapped inside somebody else's game might be one of the cruelest fates Vault-Tec ever created. Vault 51. Imagine surviving nuclear war only to discover that nobody is actually in charge. That was the starting point for Vault 51. Located in Appalachia and introduced through Fallout 76, Vault 51 was built around a simple but dangerous idea: remove the human overseer, replace them with a machine. Unlike many vaults that appointed overseers before sealing, Vault 51 entered operation without a permanent human leader. Instead, control was given to a prototype ZAC supercomputer known as CAMP, more commonly referred to as simply the Vault's ZAC system. Officially, the purpose sounds straightforward: determine the best possible method for selecting an overseer. But the actual experiment was much worse. According to the Appalachian Vault Registry, Vault 51 existed specifically to test the limits of human tribalism. The ZAC system was tasked with observing residents and eventually determining who deserved leadership. But there was only one problem: the computer interpreted instructions very literally. Early in Vault 51, Sergeant Robert Baker acted as an advisor to the machine. Baker suggested that true leaders reveal themselves during difficult situations and crises. The computer listened, then began creating crises. At first, conditions were relatively manageable. The Vault experienced resource shortages, minor emergencies, and controlled stress. Then, things escalated. The machine gradually introduced increasingly dangerous situations designed to force leadership qualities to emerge. More shortages, more conflict, and more pressure. The experiment slowly transformed from leadership testing into survival testing. Terminal entries and holotapes throughout Vault 51 reveal residents becoming increasingly paranoid and factionalized while communities formed around competing leadership figures. Groups blamed one another, and trust collapsed. The residents were unknowingly competing inside an experiment that kept raising the difficulty. Eventually, almost everyone died. One of the few important survivors was Reuben Gill. By the end of the experiment, Gill became effectively the final resident remaining alive and was declared overseer by the system. That should have been the conclusion. Instead, he escaped. Players later learned that Gill eventually returned intending to destroy the ZAC system itself. This detail matters because Vault 51 demonstrates something unusual. The machine never became evil in the traditional sense. It did not rebel, nor did it decide humanity should die. It simply followed its instructions and kept following them. What makes Vault 51 particularly cruel is that residents were never actually competing against one another. They were competing against the experiment itself. Every success simply caused the machine to increase difficulty again. Every adaptation created new problems, and every solution produced another test. Vault Tech essentially created an environment where suffering became progress. The more the residents endured, the more the system demanded. This vault also reveals something important about Vault Tech's thinking. Throughout Fallout, the company repeatedly experiments with authority structures. Who should lead? Can technology govern better? Vault 51 may have been attempting to answer all of these questions simultaneously. Unfortunately, the answer it produced was simple. Giving absolute power to a machine does not necessarily remove human suffering. Sometimes, it simply automates it. Vault 11. Few locations in Fallout reveal the cruelty of Vault Tech more clearly than a single message waiting at the end of Vault 11. Because by the time residents finally heard it, almost everyone was already dead. Located beneath the Mojave Wasteland and explored during Fallout, New Vegas, Vault 11 was created around a relatively simple experiment. Every year, residents were required to sacrifice one person. According to Vault systems, failure to comply would result in the extermination of everyone inside. The chosen resident would be sent to a sacrificial chamber where they would supposedly save the rest of the population. The experiment sounds horrific already. What makes it worse is how normal Vault 11 initially appears. At Vault 11, residents had schools, living quarters, government systems, elections, and communities. They had everything needed to build a functioning society. Then Vault Tech introduced the sacrifice requirement. Initially, residents attempted creating fair systems through voting, rotations, and community agreements. But those systems failed quickly. Terminal entries and recordings scattered throughout the vault show the population gradually transforming. Political factions emerged, groups began manipulating elections, and residents campaigned not to lead, but to avoid becoming sacrifices. Overseer positions themselves became dangerous because leaders frequently became the first targets. Power slowly shifted away from governance and toward survival. Soon, residents discovered something important. The system could be manipulated. Political favors could determine sacrifices, enemies could disappear, and entire voting blocks could control outcomes. The vault eventually descended into corruption, intimidation, violence, and political warfare. One particularly disturbing storyline involves Catherine Stone. Her husband was selected for sacrifice. Rather than accept it, she began using sexual favors and political manipulation to influence elections and protect him. Her husband was sacrificed anyway, but this triggered further violence and retaliation. By this stage, the experiment had already succeeded. Residents no longer asked whether sacrificing people was wrong. They only argued about who deserved it. Over generations, Vault 11 became increasingly unstable. Civil conflict escalated and violence spread. Eventually, large portions of the population died fighting one another. By the time players discover Vault 11 during New Vegas, almost everyone is gone. Only records remain and one final discovery. Near the end of the vault, players learn something devastating. The sacrifices were never necessary. 5 surviving residents eventually refused to continue. They decided they would rather die than sacrifice another person. After entering the chamber expecting execution, the vault computer delivered a message. Congratulations, they had passed the test. The residents were never going to be exterminated. The vault door unlocked, and they were free to leave. But 4 of the 5 survivors immediately killed themselves, and only 1 left. What makes Vault 11 rank this high is not simply death. It created conditions where murder slowly became normal over time. Vault 11 was never testing sacrifice, it was testing people. Vault 81. At first glance, Vault 81 does not belong this high on the list, but players entering during Fallout 4 discover something unusual almost immediately. The vault is functioning. Children are attending classes, residents have jobs, people trade, and doctors provide treatment. Compared to most vaults, Vault 81 almost feels normal. That normal appearance is exactly what makes its original purpose so disturbing. Located beneath the Commonwealth, Vault 81 was built around 2 separate populations. The first group consisted of ordinary residents who believed they had simply secured shelter from nuclear war. The second group remained hidden: scientists, researchers, and medical staff. Their mission had nothing to do with protecting residents. Vault Tech assigned them a very different objective: disease experimentation. According to Overseer terminal entries and internal documentation, the hidden scientific staff were tasked with researching infectious diseases, developing antibodies, and studying long-term biological responses. The residential population existed for one reason: testing subjects. The plan itself was relatively straightforward. Scientists would create experimental diseases. Those diseases would then be introduced into the resident population. Then researchers would observe results, develop treatments, and repeat the process. Unlike many Vault experiments, Vault 81 becomes particularly disturbing because residents never even knew the experiment existed. They were not participants, they were resources. And one important detail makes this experiment even worse. The scientists were specifically interested in studying mutation, radiation exposure, and long-term biological adaptation. This suggests Vault-Tec was not merely interested in curing diseases. They wanted diseases capable of surviving post-war conditions. Eventually, something happened that prevented the experiment from fully reaching its intended scale. The original overseer refused cooperation. Rather than fully assisting the hidden scientific team, portions of Vault leadership actively resisted the planned experimentation. As time passed, communication between the secret research section and the residential population disappeared. Most hidden researchers eventually died, but not everything stayed contained. During Fallout 4, players encounter one of the experiment's surviving consequences, Curie. Originally designated Miss Nanny Unit CVRIE, Curie remained inside the secret laboratory for centuries, continuing medical research long after her creators died. Players also encounter Austin Engel, a child living inside Vault 81. During the quest involving the hidden laboratory, Austin can become infected by a disease connected directly to the old experiments. This becomes one of the clearest reminders that Vault 81's research never truly disappeared. What makes Vault 81 rank this high is not body count. Vault-Tec intentionally created a system where ordinary families entered believing they were purchasing safety, children entering believing they were surviving, and parents entering believing they were protecting loved ones. But in reality, they were placed beside laboratories designing diseases for them. Vault 81 relied on trust and then turned that trust into research material. Vault 75. After everything we have covered, the sacrifices, the mind control, the addiction experiments, and the psychological torture, we finally arrive at the vault that may represent Vault-Tec at its absolute worst. Because Vault 75 did not simply experiment on people, it built an entire system around suffering. Located beneath Malden Middle School in the Commonwealth and explored during Fallout 4, Vault 75 may be the clearest example of Vault-Tec designing cruelty directly into the foundation of an experiment. Other vaults caused suffering, but Vault 75 was built around it, as the experiment started even before residents could even enter. Parents were encouraged to bring their children into the vault using heavily subsidized admission offers. Families believed they were purchasing survival. They were not. When the bombs finally fell and residents entered the facility, Vault-Tec immediately separated children from adults. Then, the adults were executed. This was not a side effect. This was the plan. The children remaining inside were raised entirely within Vault 75 systems. Education inside the vault did not resemble normal schooling. Students underwent constant physical training, combat drills, scientific testing, performance evaluations, and medical examinations. Every aspect of childhood became measurable. Terminal entries throughout the vault reveal the true purpose. Vault-Tec wanted to create genetically superior future generations. The experiment functioned as a eugenics program. Children demonstrating desirable traits continued advancing. Those who performed poorly did not. Residents were taught about a fictional outside world called Uptopland. Children were told they would eventually leave the vault and help rebuild society once they became strong enough. But this was another lie. As residents approached adulthood, they underwent what the vault called graduation. Graduation sounds positive, but in reality, it was the opposite. If an individual displayed strong intelligence but insufficient physical ability, they frequently joined research teams and scientific staff. If they possessed both intelligence and desirable physical traits, they became something else. They became research material, genetic resources, and specimens. Some residents were harvested specifically because vault scientists considered their traits valuable enough to preserve. Others were simply eliminated. Failure inside Vault 75 was often fatal. What makes this vault particularly disturbing is that the experiment was designed to continue indefinitely. Children produced future generations, and those generations produced more children. Then repeat. Unlike many vault experiments that collapsed because of violence, riots, or technical failures, Vault 75 was designed to sustain Cruelty itself. Players exploring the vault during Fallout 4 discover evidence everywhere. Training facilities, testing laboratories, dormitories, medical equipment, genetic research areas, and skeletons remain scattered throughout portions of the facility. Terminal entries reveal researchers discussing children using language closer to livestock management than education. But this vault also produced survivors. The Gunners occupy Vault 75 during Fallout 4, though they are not original residents. The original experiment largely collapsed long before players arrived, but traces remain everywhere. And perhaps the most disturbing part is how ordinary the experiment initially sounded. Protect children, educate them, and prepare them for the future. Those goals sound reasonable, but Vault-Tec simply redefined what those words meant in the most cruel way. This is why Vault 75 earns the #1 position on this list. Other vaults experimented on addiction, on obedience, and on destroyed communities. Vault 75 targeted something much more fundamental: childhood itself. If cruelty is measured through intentional suffering, manipulation, duration, and the complete removal of human dignity, Vault 75 stands above the rest. Parents were executed, children became experiments, success meant exploitation, and failure meant death. Unlike many experiments that collapsed quickly, Vault 75 was designed to continue indefinitely. Not simply surviving through generations, but suffering through generations. Looking through these vaults, one thing becomes difficult to ignore. The experiments were rarely random. Vault-Tec repeatedly returned to the same questions. How much suffering can people tolerate? How much freedom can be removed? And how much control is necessary? And perhaps the most disturbing question of all, at what point does survival stop being survival? Because many of these vaults technically worked. People survived inside them, generations lived inside them, experiments produced results, and data was collected. The problem is that somewhere along the way, preserving humanity became less important than studying it. Vault-Tec built shelters capable of protecting people from nuclear war, then deliberately made many of them worse. Perhaps that is why the vaults remain one of Fallout's most disturbing ideas. Not because of radiation, not because of mutants, and not because of nuclear war, but because long before the bombs ever fell, someone had already designed all of this and thought it was acceptable. Maybe the cruelest part was never the experiments themselves. Maybe it was how much planning went into them. And somewhere beneath the wasteland, their results are still waiting behind steel doors. Let me know which vault you think was actually the cruelest. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe button. Thanks for watching.